heart of Orlando, Florida, you are listening to the most electrifying show in media, A Neighbor's Choice. And I am your host, your neighbor, David Gornoski, and thank you for joining me once again in beautiful Central Florida on the show that tackles the subjects you just don't hear on the mainstream media, the topics that bring people together with real solutions, not false divisions. We are about disrupting hive minds, herd mentalities, and groupthink. And we are just chugging along right down that pathway here with you once again. Now, we just had an election, and I told you before the election that it wouldn't give you what you thought it was going to give you. You know, elections are not the solution. They are an asset that you can use, but they simply aren't the main tool of change that neighbors really need. The real tool, the real application of neighborly concern for each other is rolling up our sleeves and solving the problems ourselves in the free society that we have today. And so if you want to be a part of this show, you can do so at 407-916-5400. That's 407-916-5400. And boy, are we going to have another exciting show. I want people to understand that yes, it's okay to vote. That's fine. There's good opportunities sometimes, or sometimes you can make a difference. But really, it's all about putting our own skin in the game. That's what matters, folks. It's skin in the game. It's yourself getting involved and saying, you know what? I'm not going to rely on Washington, D.C. to solve problems for me. I'm going to do it myself, because that's the only thing that matters, is loving our neighbor as ourselves. But on the way over here, I almost ran over a turtle. And actually, when I stopped to look at it, it wasn't a turtle. It was a bag of uncounted ballots from Broward County. So we don't, I tried to get the authorities involved, but I don't know. But that's the problem. We don't really have a trustworthy election system. And so even if you are a big believer in votes, don't make that your primary focus of change. Get out there and do it yourself. And that's why I'm excited to have Trey Johns in studio with me. She is a great advocate for many people who are unjustly incarcerated, people who deserve clemency, people who are serving many, many years in prison for nonviolent crimes, sometimes just for being married or dating the wrong person. I met Trey through our good friend Amy Pova, who is the founder of the Can Do Clemency Foundation. And we do want to make a word that we are keeping her in prayers, because right now it's a real hellfire storm over there, over in the Malibu area where she lives, and a lot of other people that we know, and we want to keep everybody in prayer.
She just had surgery today.
Yeah, okay, yeah, all right. And Trey, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me, David. I'm excited to be here.
And you've only been here in Florida a few weeks, right?
Couple weeks. I came and hit the ground running.
Well, very good. Well, I'm glad you're here, because what you're doing is very important. I just wanted to tell people a little bit about you. You know, you yourself, you are an advocate for the Fed family, right? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, Fed Fam for Life is a nonprofit sisterhood for justice, and we're dedicated to advocating for people who can't advocate for themselves and restoring women. And to me, that is women in the federal prison system, because they're the least talked about and they're the most underserved. And so because I was part of the federal prison system, I work exclusively for my sisters in that system.
Very good. So you yourself underwent an ordeal being caged for a nonviolent behavior.
Absolutely.
Now, you were telling me before the program that you, being good with your hands, you had to build your own prison. Is that right?
Yeah, sort of. Well, I was the grade 1 welder when we were transferred. We were the first women at Waseca, Minnesota prison. And they didn't have security bars because it was a low security for the men. Mm-hmm. And the new warden decided he was going to spruce up the security. So they got me, and I measured over 400 windows in the prison, because there was not a lot of women there. It was only like 120 of us there at first. And I measured bars for all 400 of those windows, cut them, welded them, and literally installed bars in the prison to hold myself in. And the last room that I put bars on was my own cell.
Wow. And it kind of reminds me of Jesus being told to carry his own cross to his own, persecution. Not only does he have to endure violence for nonviolent behavior, he's got to carry his own punishment on his back, which you kind of did. But in some way, it kind of helps pass the time, I guess, right? To have something that you can work on.
Well,
and
yeah.
although it's not really a pleasant thing to do in any way. But I wanted to illuminate people a little bit. What's it like being in that situation? I have heard that it is a PTSD-like experience when you come out from that.
It is. I mean, prison is traumatic. And regardless of if it's a violent trauma or a psychological trauma, a lot of female prisons, we don't have a lot of violence because women, we create families. We don't create a lot of gangs in prison. But we have a psychological trauma of being abused, being misused and talked down to by male officers. There's assault, and a lot of women going into prison come from abusive relationships already, and you add that on to the psychological trauma of being caged. And yes, prison is PTSD.
Wow. So it really is a war zone in there for a lot of people, even if they don't receive actual physical violence. I've heard of things like keeping the lights on in the middle of the night. You can't even get sleep. And as we know, from a health perspective, disruptive sleep is one of the most critical things for causing illnesses like cancer and other horrific issues.
Yeah, you can go through things like sleep deprivation, or you can have guards that'll walk by in the middle of the night banging their keys to wake you up and disrupt your rest, disrupt your sleep. Then you have to you might have alarms and bells in the middle of the night, fire alarms or something like that. So, and then when you come home, one of the greatest things is like being around other people. I had the unfortunately pleasure of being around a sister named Niecy that had came home after 37 years incarcerated. And we went to the Janet Jackson concert, and I made the mistake of leaving her there and going to the restroom. And when I came back, she told me how frightened she was because she had been in a cage for 37 years, and I left her in a room with 80,000 people. And so that was traumatic in itself. The noise, the lights, the people. She said she was around 80,000 people, and she never felt so alone and afraid.
Wow.
So,
and that reminds me of that Elvis song about being so lonely in a crowd. That's the sick situation that we find ourselves in as a nation that is, instead of using what Jesus said, which is mercy, not sacrifice. Jesus said, do not resist evil with violence. Find another way. And so even if you're a listener and maybe you say, well, if it's a drug charge or whatever it is, that's not bad. That's bad stuff, right? Well, even if you think that's bad, you don't resist it with violence, which is what imprisonment is. It's putting people in a kidnap cage. There's no other way to look at it, really. You're keeping someone kidnapped, and you're keeping them in a way in which they can't be around their family, and that's psychologically devastating.
Exactly.
Give people an insight into what happens for the families, please. What's it like for those on the outside who love people who are lost in this system?
Well, fortunately for me, I had an amazing bond. But I left, my son was 6 years old. I went home, he was 15. And that took a toll on him. And my husband stood by me, which was rare for a man to stand behind a woman for 13 years. He stood by me. He kept my son coming to see me. But he would tell me, he said, every time we leave the prison, my son will ball up in the corner of the car and just silently cry. Because as a young man, he was 8, 9, 10, 11, he didn't want to be seen crying or crying for his mom. But my husband would say, days after our visits, they would be really, really hard for my son.
Wow.
And just trying to, keep that going and maintain it. Even though it was difficult for him, he wanted me to still have the opportunity to be with my son.
There's nothing more precious than the love of a child with their parent,
Nothing.
What was it like to be that moment when you get your freedom that you deserve, that you're entitled to? What was it like when you saw your child for the first time?
I looked up to him. It was when I got off the plane and I was coming down the runway, I saw him and I just couldn't believe. I was standing up, literally looking up to my son. And when I left to go to prison, he was hugging my waist. Wow. So it was an amazing feeling, but it was just a feeling of relief, you know.
Yeah, I mean, that's what people don't realize is that the people who suffer, I think, a lot the most are the people, the family members of the ones who are locked up for these unjust laws. They are the ones that grow up without seeing mom or dad or what have you a lot of times. And that is something that gets lost in all of this discussion. Folks, we're talking with Trey Johns, and she is telling us stories about what it's like for women who are unjustly incarcerated for nonviolent, victimless crimes. We'll be right back in just a second. You're listening to A Neighbor's Choice. I'm David Gornoski. We'll see you in a second. And welcome back to A Neighbor's Choice. I'm your host, David Gornoski, and we are talking with Trey Johns. She has been telling us what's really going on in prison for a lot of women around this country right now who are, in my opinion, unjustly imprisoned for nonviolent behaviors. And we have the privilege now. We have a special guest who's just called in, who is a friend of Trey, Tynice Hall. Tynice, how are you?
Hi, I'm fine.
And you are calling us from Texas, right? In federal prison in Texas, correct?
Yes.
We were just hearing from Trey about your story, just a little bit, or just basically what it's like to be in the system for a nonviolent offense. But I wanted to let you speak about your situation, and how are you doing, by the way?
Well, I'm doing pretty good right now. I've been in here for a while, 12 years now. I'm missing my family, and I'm just trying to make it day by day and just hope and pray that things go through to help me get home sooner.
Wow. And now you've been, how many years is your total sentence?
My total sentence right now is, I got sentenced to 295 months. So that comes out a little bit over 15 years. I'm at 12 right now. Then I have a consecutive run with the gun charge. So therefore, I'm at 21 years.
Wow. Is there any possibility of parole, or how does that work?
In the federal system, they don't have parole. We do 85% of their time if you stay out of trouble and keep your nose clean and make sure that everything is done properly and just work by the rules.
Now, our program on A Neighbor's Choice is all about the idea that if there's no victim, there's no crime. If you haven't harmed anybody physically, if you're not coercing someone, if you're not assaulting or anything like that, then you should be left alone to work out issues, even when you make mistakes. And I believe that if you use violence, the violence of the state, to solve problems of the heart, you only create more violence and more brokenness and more families in heartache. Do you agree with that?
I agree, because being separated from your family for so long creates a distance, and you start missing the ones you grow up. My son is just now 15, so I've missed 13 years of his life almost. So it creates a pull that removes people from family. So therefore, you don't create a stronger bond. You create a weaker bond that eliminates you from people's lives. And once you're out of sight, you're out of mind.
Right. And you were basically guilty of being in a relationship with the wrong person, basically. One of those examples, we've spoken with Amy Pova, and she was in a similar situation where she was, basically in a relationship with a guy who's moving drugs, and she gets wrapped up into it, and she gets, thrown away for so many years. You're in a similar situation.
Yes.
Tell people.
Yes, my situation.
Yeah, about your situation briefly. Yeah.
My situation was, my boyfriend was a drug dealer, and yes, I did know about what he was doing, but I wasn't involved with his activities. Because I knew about what he was doing and wasn't willing to take a plea and admit that I was selling drugs with him, they gave me conspiracy for just knowing what he was doing. And with that conspiracy, it holds a 10 to life. Wow. And because I wasn't willing to plea out and say that I did something that I didn't do, I took him to trial trying to exercise my rights, and I ended up getting sentenced to over 30 years.
Wow. This is insane to me. I can't believe that you, just because you're dating the wrong person, you get thrown into that situation. We are supposed to be a nation that has 70% of people say they're Christian. And Jesus says, do not resist evil with violence. He says, God desires mercy, not sacrifice. And to me, this sounds like a very sacrificial system, scapegoating people, treating them like they're not human. And I think you deserve to have clemency. Just in me reading your story at candoclemency.com, look up Tynice Hall. We're speaking with her right now, a friend of Trey Johns, who's in studio with us here. And I think you deserve clemency. And I think a lot of people like you, if you have no victim, no crime. I just repeat it over and over again. No victim, no crime. And that's the principle.
And on the terms about Tynice deserving clemency, the reason that women like Tynice deserve clemency so much is we neglect to talk about the women that are 20 and 25 years old that get 10, 15, and 20-year sentences. We talk about people that get life, double life, and we talk about the grandmas that's in jail. But we have our sisters like Tynice that are being, the prime of their lives are being stolen.
Right.
You know, all basically the childbearing years or the child rearing years if they already have. So, I mean, Tynice and stories like Tynice's are not, you know, not newsworthy because she didn't get consecutive life sentences, right, or because she's not a grandmother and things like that. You know, they deserve clemency and they deserve their stories to be heard just as much as people with, you know, ridiculous sentences, because in reality, a 15 or 20-year sentence for a person that's 20 years old is a ridiculous sentence.
Yeah. Especially,
like you said, for a victimless crime or a crime that no one went to the hospital for.
Right.
And that's why I advocate for women like Tynice Hall and LaShonda Hall that were 20 and 24 years old and got 35 and 45-year sentences, you know, in the prime of their lives. But because they didn't get life sentences, no big, you know, celebrities pick up their mantle and run with them.
Right. And I think what people need to understand is you shouldn't have spent one day in jail or prison as far as I'm concerned. And that if we had a constitutional system, there would be no drug war. The drug war, you know, there's no amendment that says there should be a federal war on drugs. You know, back when we had alcohol prohibition, we actually had to have an amendment to be able to do it. And then they had to repeal it. They didn't even bother doing that for the drug war. They just railroaded that in because it became a profit-making system. It became a system of domination and a way to keep people as basically wards of the state so that the state can benefit from that. And Tynice, you're in the belly of the beast right now. And I have to tell you, we're with you, and we'll do whatever we can to spread the word. This is what we're doing right here now, but even after the show, you know, letting your story get out there. Let people know a little bit more about what's your life like, you know, day to day, and, you know, how you make it through this situation.
Well, my day-to-day life is I work. I am taking college courses. I am trying to do everything that I can to better myself in here because I did spend majority of my youth life. I came in at the age of 22, so I've tried to do everything that I can to make me better. I've taken apprenticeships. I've taken different courses. At this present time, I am taking college courses. I just try to keep my head up and survive and pray every day that the next day is just going to pass, and I'm going to smile with it as I go through. I just thank God for every day that I do have, even though I am away from my family. My family is there for me to try to be there for me. It's hard with my father being sick. It's hard with my mom being by herself with my baby to try to help my whole family. I'm trying. I pray, and I just thank God for giving me breath in my body every day, even though I'm ready to try to get out and do something better with myself and put this in the past.
And we're speaking with Tynice Hall. You can look up candoclemency.com and look up her name and find out about her story and why she deserves clemency. I wanted to ask you, what would you say to people on a jury who have a situation similar to yours where you have a person charged with a nonviolent crime, being separated from their family, their little child for decades now, or even a decade or 5 years, whatever it is, what would you tell that juror who has the ability, by the way, to exercise jury nullification and say, I will judge this law to be immoral? Can you speak to that juror who has that power? Because that's happening every day in America.
If I can go back 12 years and talk to the people that was on my jury, I would tell them to look into deeper of what's going on. It's not just a war on crime. It's not just a war on race. It's not just a war on drugs. It's a war against people, and they're incarcerating people that really don't have too much to do with what's really going on. I would ask them to look into it deeper to see what's going on, because just because you're trying to get home to cook dinner, a person that's going through something like this, when there's really not much and they're really piling on evidence when none of it really makes sense, look into it. Open your eyes to see what's really going on. Exercise your right to jury trial. When people are doing everything that they're trying to do and I'm trying to fight my life and take my life back, it must be a reason that I'm fighting that hard. Because when you know you're guilty, sometimes you sit down. When you know you're innocent, you fight. And I'm going to fight to the end until I'm released.
And I'm going to fight with you, little baby.
Very good. And we will, too, because this is really an abomination. And it's a disgrace that we allow this to happen. This is modern-day slavery as far as I'm concerned, because you have no right to lay a finger on anyone's head because they did something you didn't like or they sold something you didn't like. I mean, alcohol creates more overdoses. It creates violence. It creates all kinds of terrible things. And I don't see us arresting the wife of the Budweiser CEO, you know?
Exactly.
You know, it doesn't make any sense, does it?
Really don't.
And
Trey?
Like you said, I just think prison reform, criminal justice reform, you know, if we want to try to find a smooth pathway, you know, we can start with our women. Mm-hmm. You know, we can start with our women because historically and studies have always shown that women respond so much better to rehabilitation. We respond so much better to actual support, real support. And so, you know, that the First Step Act, the Dignity Act, you know, the First Step Act will help Tynice. Mm-hmm. You know, that's why I support the First Step Act. Mm-hmm. You know, I'm not doing this work for prison reform and sentencing reform and everything. I don't think it's going to happen all in one fell swoop. So we have an opportunity to get some prison reform right now, and we need to take advantage of that opportunity instead of saying, no, that's not enough and throwing it back and then telling people like Tynice, well, just wait a little bit longer. You know, they've been waiting long enough. Mm-hmm. You know, and so that's my thing for those people that oppose the First Step Act. Right.
we need some kind of step. Let's get some steps.
I mean, and it's
one step at a time, right?
And everything supposedly start with one.
Right.
So if this the First Step Act, then that just makes room for the next step.
Well, Tynice, if there's any solace, did we lose Tynice? I think we might have.
Tynice, you still here?
I think we lost her. Yeah, she lost. Well, Tynice, we're going to do whatever we can to keep fighting for you. We appreciate what Trey's doing. You know, they don't even give you hardly any time to talk. You know, but that's the thing. You know, we want to see Tynice Hall return to her family, where she should have been the whole time. And we know that the drug war is never going to solve things. You could ban caffeine. I was hearing about these Monster energy drinks causing a lot of heart disease and stuff. And I said, you know, what if one day they wanted to ban that, right? You know, if you ban Monster energy drinks, you know, it would create a violent black market. Anytime you ban a substance that has a demand, you're going to create a violent black market because that's the only way to deal with the trade. If you legalize it, you take the violence out of it. And that's for every kind of vice. And there should be, like you were saying, a place for therapy or healing, rehab, whatever, for the harder drugs. But the whole thing should be completely legalized, in my opinion.
Exactly. Well, that's, like I said, that's one of the goals and missions of FedFam for Life, and that's FEDFAM, the number 4, LIFE.org. You know, we're trying to heal. We're trying to heal women coming out of prison.
One more time for the folks listening.
FedFam for Life, FEDFAM, the number 4, LIFE.org. It's like federal family. That's what it came from, FedFam for Life, because I've met people in prison that are closer to blood. So support us, support women-led organizations, support formerly incarcerated-led organizations, FedFam for Life.
Well, thank you very much, Trey. I've enjoyed speaking with you, and keep up the good fight. We'll be talking with you. We'll keep up posted with what's going on.
Definitely.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to A Neighbor's Choice Radio. I'm David Gornoski. We'll see you in just a moment. A Neighbor's Choice Radio. Coming to you live in Orlando, Florida. And wow, that was a wonderful 2 segments we just completed with Trey Johns and Tynice Hall, who's called us live from federal prison in Texas for a nonviolent crime that she's serving many, many years for. And I don't think they should serve 1 day, because again, think about it. If you're selling alcohol literally causes more violent deaths. It creates overdoses. It creates family brokenness than any of these drugs, most of these drugs that are completely, illegal. And yet we don't use violence of law to punish the alcohol seller. In the same token, we need to understand that principle applies to other drugs, or even, it's not just about drugs. I'm against I'm against victimless crime laws, even if it's in regards to things like raw milk. Right now it's illegal to sell raw milk. If you squeeze milk from a cow and then you sell it to someone, that's considered a crime in the federal books. And the same if you, sell certain soaps and things that the Amish farmers try to sell. They have little laws for everything. And this is not what America was founded to be about. And we have now Dr. Wei-Ping Yu with us, Chief Science Officer of A Neighbor's Choice. And just want to ask you, Dr. Yu, what your thoughts are on this whole victimless crime law epidemic, where it seems like everything is a crime, it seems.
The toll of the victims of crime is not just the person involved, him or herself. I see the biggest one is how much, to the family members. Remember a few weeks ago when you interviewed the daughter of a victims of crime in the prison, she spent almost entire her adulthood try to bring true justice back.
Right.
Bring her mom out of it because association to a husband or maybe to a boyfriend.
Right.
This is a really heart-wrenching.
Right. Yeah. And it just using violence does not solve any problem of the heart. If you have an addiction or you have a desire for something that stimulates your mind or distorts your mind or allows you to see whatever, if you're doing psychedelic, whatever it is, those things may be bad, right? But just because something's bad doesn't mean you bring in the government to put a gun to your head and put you in a cage with, where violence could be rife,
Right. If the imprisonment or incarceration bring a new man, bring a good education come out, so that would be good. But seems like a common pattern come out of prisoner is PTSD type of drama.
Yeah. And
it may not benefit, serve the purpose of punishment or benefit society.
Right. Well, and again, it is a traumatic experience. It is a PTSD causing experience, and I don't care what the action is. There's another way to solve it. You don't, when you make something illegal, it creates a hot stove effect wherein people have an heightened desire to try it. If you are a teenager, if you are a disaffected person who is someone who feels isolated socially, you're going to be drawn to a counterculture that is engaging in substances which are considered illegal. You're going to be drawn to it because it's prohibited. That's the nature of the hot stove effect. Don't do it, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. That makes you heighten your desire. I mean, if you want to go biblical on this, even the Apostle Paul talks about that law can provoke people to want to crave sin more. That law acts as a stumbling block that heightens the desire of that which you try to punish through coercion. But it's only through mutual forbearance, meaning you treat someone the way you would want to be treated. I know all of us have problems that we are not proud to speak of publicly. We all have issues. We all have things we have done that we're not proud of, but we don't want to be treated in a violent way. For example, let me give you an example. I believe that, adultery has caused more broken families, more violence in communities, more fatherlessness, and all of the occasions that create violence over time. I believe adultery has created more of problems than any drug that's currently illegal in the United States.
That's right.
And yet we don't criminalize adultery, right? We don't make it illegal for you to commit adultery, because that would create a completely violent, ridiculous situation of tyranny where you'd have adultery police looking into windows every night. You'd have people looking in your cars on Lover's Lane. I mean, this is like, it's an insane, ridiculous idea. Oh, if we use violence and put you in a cage, then you won't be an adulterer. Come on, give me a break. That's the same thing with any substance. Or whether it's economic laws. There's all kinds of economic regulations. You can't do this in your business. You can't do that. And every time you create a law that says, nope, we're going to fine you at the EPA, we're going to fine you with this or fine you with that because you did your employees this way or that way. Every time you make a law against a victimless act, whether it's in your business or your personal life, it doesn't solve the act it's trying to stop, but it only creates a mirror blowback. It creates more problems. So if you say, we're going to have a law where we're going to criminalize certain speech, you're not going to get rid of the speech. You're just going to make the speech go underground. You're going to make the haters get more powerful because they're going to feel victimized by the law. They're going to have a martyr's complex, and you're going to fuel their message by trying to use coercion to solve a problem of the heart. And that's the case for everything you need to understand. The founders understood this, folks. The founders, unlike the people currently in Washington, they understood this principle that it's about life, it's about liberty, and it's about your pursuit of happiness, or as Jefferson originally wrote it, your property. And your property includes that which you would like to indulge in, even if it's something that's really harmful to your body. That's what humanity is about, that you have to take responsibility for yourself and not rely on a nanny state to tell you how big your cup size can be, whether you can have a plastic straw or a paper straw, or how big your house can be, what you can paint it, as we've seen before. That's the kind of principle that's going to completely destroy America. That's the principle that we can unite everyone around. Everyone has pet scapegoats. Everybody, whether you're on the left or right, we have people we say, well, let's make a law against that. And what we need to do is come together on the principle of liberty, saying let's both drop our scapegoats. On the left, drop the scapegoat of the rich person. Okay, yes, there are crony capitalists, but the way to defeat crony capitalism is not more government control of the economy. It's actually less control. It's more free markets. Free markets beat crony capitalists that need government subsidies to keep their business thriving. Right?
Yes, yes, I agree with you. We need to solve them from a moral standing point and based on the high principle. And also, I have a problem with operational problem because we trivialize this victimless, crime and put huge populations in the prisoner system. What happens? Actually, we really hurt the true crime. And, because of overpopulation, and we may punish less than the true crime.
Right. All the resources go to the drug laws, the victimless crimes, yes. And none of the resources go to solving the real violent crimes, the assault crimes, the property theft. Those things get left unsolved because there's not as much federal money in that. So, folks, if you're a conservative, if you're a family values person, you want to bring families together. You want to defend liberty and let people work out their own salvation with fear and trembling. And that's the only way you can do it, is allow people to take their own responsibility, not use violence to treat them as if you own their body. You don't own their body. God does. And God doesn't. God says desire mercy, not sacrifice. God desires mercy, not sacrifice. Folks, if you have a story, whether it's a small city issue, a fine in your local city municipality, or whether it's a federal issue, or you have a family member or a friend who is in a situation in which they've been scapegoated by society. Let's hear from you. Email me at david@aneighborschoice.com, david@aneighborschoice.com. That's david@aneighborschoice.com. I want to hear from your story. We'll bring you into the studio and tell your story. You're listening to A Neighbor's Choice. We'll be back in a second.
Hi, this is David Gornoski, founder of A Neighbor's Choice. A Neighbor's Choice is sponsored by people just like you, making weekly or monthly contributions to support the development of this show, which is dedicated to introducing Jesus' personhood revolution to the broader public. Visit www.aneighborschoice.com, click on Contribute, and start your monthly pledge today. We appreciate your support.
We are in a fight for our freedoms, folks. We have to get things done. We cannot sit idly by, waiting for elections to solve things for us. We got to solve them ourselves. I'm David Gornoski, and you're listening to the final segment of A Neighbor's Choice Radio, the program that solves the issue of toxic groupthink. That's the problem at the heart of our cultural malaise. That's the problem of why we can't get along. That's the problem why we're dividing into all these continual tribes, this identity group, that identity group, instead of just seeing each other as human beings. That humanity, that we are all made in the image of God, and that we all should love our neighbor as ourselves, that we should always do that which we would want done to us. That is the guiding principle that will allow us to get to a better place together. It won't be, let's get 10 more seats or 2 more congressmen or 10 more this. That stuff is never going to get you anything, folks. That's why you're not feeling satisfied. I don't care if you're a Democrat or a Republican tonight. You could get Trump out of there tomorrow if you're a Democrat. You're still not going to feel catharsis. You're still not going to feel relief, because that guy is not the problem that really bugs you. He's just a projection of your own issues. Your issues deal with things that we all have, and that is we want to have a good life for our family. We want to have a good place to live. We want to be left alone from violence. We want to be able to be with our family for the rest of our lives and not be locked away in cages for every kind of silly, ridiculous insanity. That's the principle that unites every single human being. You can't find me a human being that really disagrees with that if you ask them one-on-one. The only problem we have is that we get stuck in this toxic groupthink where, now I got to be this partisan guy and I got to start throwing rocks when I'm in a crowd. Get out of the crowd. That's what I say on my advertisement every time you hear my advertisement. I say, I am your political exorcist, because I'm not here to keep you in a state of anger and despair. You can listen to the other guys all over the TV or wherever you want to go, and you can hear anger, despair, you can hear blame games. But when you come to my program, we're going to deal with you as a human being. As a human being. Every human being deserves liberty. We're only on this time in this planet for a few decades. And it goes like this. It goes like this, folks. Why would you ever want to rob someone of their time on this planet by putting them in a dungeon, giving them traumatic disorders because they got high, or they drank raw milk, or they were too greedy with their wages and the way they paid their employee? Whatever it is, you know it's wrong in your heart. You know that's not what you were made to do. You know that if you yourself had to walk Tynice Hall, a woman who was put in prison for now decades for dating the wrong guy who was selling drugs, if you had to walk Tynice Hall yourself down that aisle to the prison cell and lock that metal, you wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it. If you yourself had to put your skin in the game, you wouldn't go through with it. But it's because of politics that blinds us to what we're doing to each other that we get caught in this perpetual, vicious, nasty cycle of tearing each other apart. And it's never going to end as long as we get caught in that groupthink. We have to step out of it. We have to acknowledge the dignity of every person, no matter who they are. And when we do that, if that's the guiding principle, then we can do whatever we want. And that's the whole purpose of this show. This show, when I'm done with this show, when I'm finally done doing this radio program, you're going to see things that you didn't think was possible before, because we're going to roll up our sleeves. We're going to find the innovators creating clean energy, creating elemental transmutation, creating new forms of transportation, of creating new forms of energy, of new forms of medicine. We're going to put them where they need to be publicly through this program, and I'm going to do it behind the scenes as well to make sure that when I hang my hat up and stop doing this program and the writing I do all over the internet, that we're going to make this world a better place, that we're going to shift the population to a better place. We don't need big government to do it. Big government isn't going to give us anything, folks. What does the big government crowd actually have on tap for us? Let's see what their biggest promises are. Free college for everyone. Oh, wow. How are you going to do that? By printing money out of thin air, which actually debases the purchasing power of the money for the people who got those free degrees. Oh, yeah, I've got a free degree, but hot dogs cost $20. How can I afford anything? You gave me my little certificate. You gave me my merit badge, Mr. Government. But what did I get for it? I got debased currency, because you can't keep printing your money to prosperity. You can't give anything for free. It always hurts somebody in the end, including the little guy, the person who thinks they're getting something if government prints out a free college degree for everybody. So you can't get anything with free college for everybody, and you can't get anything for free medical care for everybody. What does it matter if government's covering your medical care if it doesn't work? If the medicine that they're giving you on tap, socialized medicine, yeah, okay. Guess what? Socialized nutrition guidelines from the pyramid guides, they failed us. They got us sick and fat and obese with chronic illnesses. So how is single-payer medicine going to solve what single-payer nutrition guidelines created? Folks, you got to go deeper than that. Don't allow these people to hoodwink you. Oh, let's just surrender to single-payer medicine. Let the government run it all. Yeah, that's what they told us. They told us to eat 7 to 11 servings of grains a day. And now we got diabetes, heart disease, we've got cholesterol, we've got cancer, we got everything in the world floating around us since we declared war on cancer in the 60s with Nixon. Nothing's getting better. But yeah, let's just give more government control. Not going to happen, folks. Those are old, stinky, outdated ideas. We're not going to use them. We're going to a better place, folks. We're going to a place where we can have freedom and prosperity and get things done. Dr. you can't wait for what's coming up next week. Next week, we have New York Times bestseller, Eben Alexander. He's the author of Proof of Heaven, a neurosurgeon's journey into the afterlife. We're going to do something really interesting for Thanksgiving, talk about the nature of consciousness itself.
The origin of consciousness. That's one of the biggest mystery in the world.
Well, that's what it's all about, folks. I'm Conscious. I'll see you next week. Tuesday, 8 o'clock on A Neighbor's Choice Radio. Don't miss it. Godspeed.